Introduction. In the heart of a bustling modern city, where the streets never seemed to sleep and the clamor of life echoed day and night, lived a man named Lucius. Like so many others, Lucius found himself entangled in the relentless demands of the world around him. He was in his mid-30s, well into his career, and outwardly successful. Yet beneath the surface, he felt the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him, an invisible burden that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Lucius was no stranger to the struggles of modern life. Each morning, he would wake up with a sense of dread, his mind already racing with thoughts of looming deadlines, strained relationships, and unrelenting financial pressures. The city, with its ceaseless energy, mirrored his own restlessness, and he often found himself caught in the whirlwind of expectations, both his own and those imposed upon him by society. Despite his efforts to find happiness and peace, Lucius felt increasingly trapped. He worked long hours, striving for success and recognition, yet the satisfaction he sought remained elusive. His days were filled with fleeting moments of joy, quickly overshadowed by anxiety and frustration. It seemed that no matter how hard he tried, contentment was always just out of reach. Lucius began to wonder why, despite everything he did to create a fulfilling life, he still felt so empty and overwhelmed. He noticed how the opinions of others dictated his self-worth, how external circumstances seemed to control his emotions. He was living in a state of constant reaction, reacting to setbacks with frustration, to criticism with defensiveness, and to uncertainty with fear. The cycle was exhausting, and Lucius was growing weary of it. He longed for a life where he wasn't at the mercy of every twist and turn, where his inner peace wasn't so easily shattered by the chaos of the world around him. But as much as he desired change, Lucius felt powerless to break free from the patterns that had taken root in his life. One evening, after yet another grueling day at work, Lucius found himself wandering into a small, quiet bookstore on a side street he had never noticed before. The shelves were lined with books on philosophy, history, and self-improvement, topics that had always intrigued him, but that he had never found the time to explore. As he browsed, a particular book caught his eye. Its title was simple: The Stoic Way. Curious, Lucius picked up the book and began to read. The words spoke of a philosophy that promised inner strength and tranquility, not through the control of external events, but through the mastery of one's own mind. It was a radical idea, one that resonated deeply with Lucius as he stood there, surrounded by the quiet wisdom of ages past. In that moment, Lucius felt a spark of hope, a sense that perhaps there was another way to live, a way that could free him from the chains of his own mind. He purchased the book and left the store, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. Little did he know, this chance encounter would mark the beginning of a profound journey, one that would lead him to discover the enduring principles of Stoicism and, through them, the path to true inner peace. Certainly. I'll begin with Chapter 1, focusing on the power of perception. I'll expand on Lucius's experiences, thoughts, and how he applies the Stoic principles he learns with rich detail and depth. This will ensure we meet the target length of 17,000 words across all chapters. Chapter 1. The Power of Perception. Lucius awoke the next morning with the weight of the previous day's stress still lingering in his mind. His apartment, once a place of comfort, now felt like a cage, each corner reminding him of the pressures that awaited him outside. As he prepared for his day, the same thoughts that had haunted him for months returned, swirling around in his mind like a relentless storm. The demands of his job, the expectations of his peers, and the uncertainty of the future all conspired to rob him of any sense of peace. But today, something was different. As Lucius reached for his usual breakfast of hastily prepared coffee and toast, his eyes fell on the book he had purchased the night before. The Stoic Way. It sat on the kitchen table, its cover simple yet inviting. Lucius paused, his hand hovering over the coffee cup, as he recalled the words he had read the previous night about the power of perception. The idea was a simple one. It wasn't the events themselves that caused distress, but rather his perception of them. Lucius had never considered this before. He had always believed that his stress and anxiety were direct results of the pressures in his life, external forces that were beyond his control. But what if he could control how he perceived these forces? What if he could change his response to the events that seemed to dominate his existence? Intrigued, Lucius decided to delve deeper. He settled into his chair, the book in hand, and began reading where he had left off. The chapter spoke of the ancient Stoics, philosophers who had faced the harsh realities of life with a calmness that seemed almost supernatural. They believed that the mind held the ultimate power over one's emotions, and that by mastering one's perception, a person could achieve a state of tranquility that was unshakable. Lucius closed the book and leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. Could it really be that simple? Could the key to his inner peace lie not in changing the world around him, but in changing how he saw the world? He decided to test the theory. The day began as it always did. Lucius joined the throngs of commuters on the crowded subway, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and the hum of conversation. As the train jolted forward, Lucius felt the familiar stirrings of irritation. He hated the morning commute, the way it pressed him into the lives of strangers, forcing him to endure the discomfort of their presence. Today, however, he caught himself before the feeling could take root. What if this isn't something to hate? He thought to himself. What if this is simply an opportunity to practice patience? Lucius took a deep breath and let the thought settle. The train ride was still uncomfortable, the crowd still overwhelming, but the irritation didn't take hold in the way it usually did. He found himself focusing on the sensation of his own breath, the rhythm of the train, the fact that this journey was temporary, just another part of his day. The commute hadn't changed, but his experience of it had. When Lucius arrived at work, he was met with the usual barrage of emails and urgent tasks. His boss, a man known for his abruptness, immediately called him into a meeting to discuss a project that had fallen behind schedule. The tone of the conversation was tense. His boss's frustration was palpable. Normally, Lucius would have internalized this frustration, letting it feed his own anxiety. But today, he remembered what he had read. It wasn't the situation itself that caused stress, but how he perceived it. As his boss spoke, Lucius focused on listening rather than reacting. He observed the situation without judgment, considering the facts rather than the emotions swirling around them. His boss wasn't attacking him personally, he was simply expressing concern about the project. Lucius realized that he had the power to respond calmly and constructively rather than defensively. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Lucius said, his voice steady. "I'll make sure we get back on track and address the issues. I appreciate your feedback." His boss seemed taken aback by Lucius's calm demeanor, but nodded in agreement. The meeting ended quickly, and Lucius returned to his desk, feeling a sense of control that he hadn't felt in a long time. He had faced a situation that would normally have left him anxious and upset, but by shifting his perception, he had maintained his composure. The rest of the day unfolded with similar challenges. A colleague made a snide remark about a report Lucius had written, and instead of reacting with irritation, Lucius chose to see it as an opportunity to improve his work. He recognized that the comment was more about the colleague's own frustrations than about the quality of his report. By detaching his emotions from the situation, Lucius was able to remain calm and focused. As the day drew to a close, Lucius reflected on how different he felt. The situations he had encountered were no less challenging than usual, but his experience of them had changed dramatically. He no longer felt like a victim of his circumstances, constantly buffeted by the winds of external events. Instead, he felt like the captain of his own ship, steering through the storm with a steady hand. That evening, Lucius walked home with a sense of lightness that was unfamiliar to him. The city around him, once a source of constant stress, seemed to hum with a different energy. He noticed the warmth of the evening sun, the soft rustle of leaves in the park, the laughter of children playing. These were things he had passed by countless times without noticing, too absorbed in his own worries to appreciate them. Lucius realized that by shifting his perception, he had opened himself up to the beauty that had always been present in his life but had gone unnoticed. The lesson of the day was clear. The world was as he chose to see it. And by choosing to see it differently, he could change not only his experience of the world, but his entire life. As Lucius prepared for bed, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the insights he had gained. The power of perception, he realized, was not just a concept in an old philosophy book. It was a tool he could use every day to navigate the challenges of life. And with this tool, he could begin to build the inner peace he had been searching for. The next morning, Lucius woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that mastering his perception wouldn't be easy. It would require constant awareness and effort. But the events of the previous day had shown him that it was possible, and that the rewards were well worth the effort. As he stepped out into the city once again, Lucius felt a quiet confidence growing within him. He was beginning to understand that while he couldn't control the world around him, he could control how he responded to it. And in that control lay the key to his freedom. Lucius carried this newfound understanding with him throughout the day. When a project at work hit an unexpected snag, he reminded himself that this was just another opportunity to practice the power of perception. Rather than seeing the problem as a setback, he viewed it as a challenge to be met with creativity and resilience. In his interactions with others, Lucius became more mindful of how his perceptions influenced his reactions. When a friend cancelled plans at the last minute, instead of feeling slighted, Lucius chose to see the situation from his friend's perspective, understanding that unexpected events happen and that this wasn't a personal affront. This shift in perception allowed him to respond with understanding rather than disappointment. Over the weeks that followed, Lucius continued to practice this principle, and the results were transformative. He found that by consciously choosing how he perceived the events in his life, he was able to maintain a sense of calm, even in the face of challenges. His relationships improved as he became less reactive and more understanding. His work performance also benefited as he approached tasks with a clear mind and a positive attitude. But the most profound change was within Lucius himself. He no longer felt like a victim of circumstance, constantly at the mercy of forces beyond his control. Instead, he felt empowered, knowing that he had the ability to shape his experience of the world through his perception. This realization brought him a deep sense of peace, a calmness that had eluded him for so long. One evening, as Lucius sat on his balcony watching the sun set over the city, he reflected on his journey. He thought about the man he had been just a few weeks ago, stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed by life. That man had been searching for peace in all the wrong places, looking for external solutions to what was fundamentally an internal problem. Now, Lucius understood that true peace came not from changing the world around him, but from changing how he perceived that world. The power of perception had become a guiding principle in his life, one that he knew would continue to shape his journey towards inner peace. As the last light of the day faded from the sky, Lucius felt a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, and that there would be times when his resolve would be tested. But he also knew that he had the tools to navigate whatever challenges came his way. The power of perception was now a part of who he was, a strength he could rely on no matter what life threw at him. And so, with a heart full of calm and a mind clear of the day's worries, Lucius retired for the night, ready to face. Chapter 2. Voluntary Discomfort. The morning dawned crisp and clear. The city bathed in the soft glow of early light. Lucius woke with a renewed sense of determination, his mind still reflecting on the lessons of perception he had begun to integrate into his life. But as he stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the skyline, another thought began to take shape, a thought born from the next chapter of the Stoic Way that he had read the night before. It was about discomfort. Specifically, the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort. A concept that at first seemed counterintuitive to Lucius. After all, wasn't life already filled with enough challenges and discomforts? Why would anyone choose to add more? But as he read deeper into the chapter, the wisdom behind this practice became clearer. The Stoics believed that by deliberately embracing small, controlled discomforts, a person could build resilience, strengthen their character, and better prepare themselves for the inevitable hardships of life. It was about conditioning the mind and body to endure and even thrive in the face of adversity. Lucius found this idea both intriguing and intimidating. He had spent much of his life, like most people, avoiding discomfort whenever possible, seeking out the path of least resistance, the comfort of routine, and the security of the familiar. But what if this avoidance was actually weakening him? What if, by constantly seeking comfort, he was robbing himself of the opportunity to grow stronger? Determined to test this idea, Lucius decided to start small. He would introduce a series of voluntary discomforts into his daily routine. Nothing extreme at first, but enough to challenge his mind and body. He wanted to see if this ancient practice could truly build the resilience he sought. The first experiment began the very next day. Lucius had always enjoyed a hot shower in the morning, the warm water helping him to wake up and prepare for the day ahead. But today, he would forego that comfort. As he turned the faucet, he braced himself, knowing what was to come. The water was icy cold, and the shock of it against his skin was immediate and intense. His breath caught in his throat, and his first instinct was to jump back, to turn off the water and retreat to the warmth of his towel. But he didn't. Instead, Lucius forced himself to stay under the stream, focusing on his breathing, willing himself to remain calm. The initial shock began to subside, replaced by a strange sense of clarity. His mind, previously foggy with the remnants of sleep, was now fully awake, every nerve alert. The discomfort was real, but so was the sense of achievement that began to build within him. As he stepped out of the shower, shivering but invigorated, Lucius felt a small surge of pride. He had faced discomfort, and had not only survived, but emerged stronger for it. The rest of the day seemed easier somehow, his mind sharper, his spirit lighter. The cold shower had been a small thing, but it had set the tone for his day, a day where he felt more in control, more resilient. Encouraged by this success, Lucius began to incorporate other forms of voluntary discomfort into his routine. He started with fasting, something he had read about but never tried. The idea was to skip a meal, not out of necessity, but as a conscious choice. Lucius chose to skip lunch one day, something that initially filled him with unease. His body was used to regular meals, and the prospect of going without food for an extended period made him anxious. As noon approached and his colleagues headed out for their usual lunch break, Lucius stayed behind at his desk. The first pangs of hunger were mild, but they grew stronger as the hours passed. By mid-afternoon, the hunger was a gnawing presence, distracting him from his work. But rather than give in, Lucius leaned into the discomfort. He reminded himself that this was temporary, that his body was stronger than his cravings, and that this was a test of his willpower. To his surprise, the hunger began to fade. By the time the workday ended, Lucius felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had pushed through the discomfort and emerged on the other side with a clearer mind and a stronger sense of self-control. The meal he finally had that evening tasted better than any he could remember, not just because he was hungry, but because he had earned it. He had proven to himself that he could endure discomfort and that endurance had made him stronger. As the days turned into weeks, Lucius continued to explore different forms of voluntary discomfort. He took up rigorous physical exercise, pushing his body beyond its usual limits. He opted for the stairs instead of the elevator, walked instead of taking the bus, and added extra weight to his workout routine. Each time he felt the familiar resistance, his body protesting against the strain, his mind urging him to quit. But with each session, he found himself growing not just physically stronger, but mentally tougher. Lucius also began to practice a form of digital detox, reducing his reliance on the constant stream of entertainment and distraction provided by his phone and computer. He set aside specific times during the day to disconnect, resisting the urge to check social media or watch videos. This was perhaps the hardest challenge yet. The pull of the digital world was strong, and the discomfort of sitting alone with his thoughts, without the usual distractions, was profound. Yet, in that discomfort, Lucius discovered something unexpected: peace. The silence, once oppressive, began to feel liberating. His mind, free from the constant barrage of information, started to settle into a deeper state of focus. He found himself thinking more clearly, his creativity sparking in ways it hadn't in years. The discomfort of disconnection had given way to the comfort of clarity. Through these practices, Lucius began to understand the true value of voluntary discomfort. It wasn't about punishing oneself or seeking out suffering for its own sake. Rather, it was about building resilience, creating a reserve of inner strength that could be called upon in times of genuine hardship. Each small discomfort faced voluntarily was like a drop in a reservoir, slowly filling it until it was full, ready to sustain him through whatever challenges life might throw his way. But beyond resilience, there was another, more profound lesson that Lucius began to internalize: gratitude. By voluntarily giving up comforts, even temporarily, he gained a deeper appreciation for the things he usually took for granted. The warmth of a hot shower, the taste of a good meal, the ease of digital connection. All these things became more precious when they were no longer automatic, but privileges to be cherished. One day, as Lucius walked home after a particularly grueling workout, he noticed the sun setting over the city. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, the buildings silhouetted against the vibrant colors. He paused for a moment, taking it all in. His body was tired, his muscles aching, but his spirit was at peace. The discomfort of the day had stripped away the distractions, leaving him with a simple, profound appreciation for the world around him. In that moment, Lucius understood what the Stoics had been trying to teach him. Voluntary discomfort wasn't about seeking out pain. It was about stripping away the excess, the unnecessary comforts that dulled the senses and made life seem mundane. By embracing discomfort, he had sharpened his senses, heightened his awareness, and deepened his appreciation for the simple joys of life. As Lucius continued his journey, he carried this lesson with him. Voluntary discomfort had become a cornerstone of his daily practice, a way to cultivate resilience, gratitude, and inner strength. And as he faced the inevitable challenges of life, he found that the discomfort he had chosen had prepared him well. He was no longer afraid of hardship because he had learned to see it not as an enemy, but as a teacher. The practice of voluntary discomfort had changed Lucius in ways he hadn't expected. It had made him stronger, yes, but it had also made him more aware, more present, and more grateful for the life he had. And in that awareness, he found a peace that he had been searching for all along, a peace that came not from avoiding discomfort, but from embracing it. As he sat down that evening to write in his journal, Lucius reflected on the journey he had begun. The road to inner peace was long and challenging, but he knew now that he had the tools to navigate it. And with each step he took, he felt himself growing stronger, more resilient, and more at peace with the world around him. Voluntary discomfort had taught Lucius that true strength didn't come from avoiding pain, but from facing it head-on, and that true peace didn't come from constant comfort, but from the wisdom to embrace discomfort when necessary. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life, a lesson that had transformed not just his body, but his mind and spirit as well. And so, as the night fell and the city around him settled into the quiet hum of evening, Lucius closed his journal, feeling a deep sense of contentment. He was on a journey, one that was far from over, but one that he now knew was worth every step, every challenge, and every moment of discomfort. For in those moments, he had found not just resilience, but a path to true inner peace. Chapter 3. Developing an attitude of gratitude. Lucius's journey into the teachings of Stoicism had already brought significant change to his life. He had learned to master his perceptions, reframing challenges as opportunities rather than threats. He had also embraced voluntary discomfort, discovering strength in enduring and even welcoming small hardships. But as he delved further into the Stoic way, Lucius came across another principle that intrigued him: the cultivation of gratitude. Gratitude. It was a word that Lucius had always associated with holidays, with polite thank you notes, and with those rare moments when something particularly fortunate happened. But as he read deeper into the Stoic philosophy, he realized that gratitude, in the Stoic sense, was something far more profound. It wasn't just about being thankful for the good things in life. It was about finding gratitude in everything, even in the challenges and hardships. The Stoics believed that gratitude was a powerful tool for cultivating inner peace. By focusing on what one has, rather than on what one lacks, a person could shift their mindset from scarcity to abundance, from dissatisfaction to contentment. It was about appreciating the present moment, no matter how imperfect it might seem, and finding value in every experience, whether pleasant or painful. Lucius pondered this idea as he sat in his small apartment one evening, the city's lights twinkling through his window. He had always thought of himself as a realist, someone who faced the world as it was, without the rose-colored glasses of naive optimism. But he couldn't deny that his focus had often been on what was missing from his life: the promotion he hadn't yet received, the relationships that hadn't panned out, the future achievements that still seemed so far out of reach. What if, instead of constantly striving for more, he took a moment to appreciate what he already had? What if, instead of lamenting what was lost or unattained, he celebrated what was present in his life? The next morning, Lucius decided to put this principle into practice. He started his day as he normally did, with a simple breakfast and a glance at the news. But this time, he paused before he ate, taking a moment to truly appreciate the food before him. It was nothing fancy, just toast and eggs. But as he considered the effort that had gone into growing, harvesting, and preparing the food, he felt a small but significant shift in his perception. This simple meal was a gift, one that he had overlooked countless times before. As Lucius walked to work, he made a conscious effort to notice the world around him. The streets were bustling as usual, but instead of rushing through them with his mind focused on the tasks ahead, he slowed down, paying attention to the small details. The warmth of the sun on his face, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting from a nearby cafe, the sound of a bird chirping in a tree. All these things, so easily ignored, now felt like treasures. When he arrived at the office, Lucius was greeted by his colleagues, their faces familiar but often overlooked in the rush of daily life. He took a moment to genuinely connect, offering a smile, a kind word, a bit of gratitude for their presence in his life. He realized how easy it was to take the people around him for granted, to focus on their flaws or the stress of work, rather than appreciating their contributions and companionship. As the day progressed, Lucius faced the usual challenges: tight deadlines, demanding clients, unexpected problems. But instead of letting these difficulties drag him down, he tried to find something to be grateful for in each situation. When a client expressed dissatisfaction with a project, Lucius took it as an opportunity to learn and improve, grateful for the chance to grow. When a meeting ran longer than expected, he appreciated the opportunity to engage deeply with his team, valuing their insights and efforts. In the past, these moments would have frustrated him, adding to the weight of stress he carried. But by practicing gratitude, Lucius found that he was able to approach each challenge with a lighter heart and a clearer mind. The difficulties were still there, but they were no longer burdens. They were simply parts of the tapestry of his life, each with its own value and purpose. That evening, Lucius decided to take his practice a step further. He began a gratitude journal, something he had read about but never seriously considered. Each night, before going to bed, he would write down 3 things he was grateful for that day. The first few entries were simple: thankful for a good meal, for a productive day at work, for a conversation with a friend. But as the days passed, Lucius found himself digging deeper, finding gratitude in the small, often unnoticed aspects of his life. He wrote about the comfort of his bed, the laughter he shared with a colleague, the satisfaction of solving a complex problem. He even began to find gratitude in the more challenging aspects of his day: the traffic jam that gave him time to reflect, the difficult conversation that taught him patience, the cold weather that made him appreciate the warmth of his home. As his gratitude practice deepened, Lucius noticed a profound shift in his mindset. He began to approach each day with a sense of abundance rather than scarcity. The focus on what was missing or what could go wrong faded, replaced by an appreciation for what was present and what had gone right. This shift didn't mean that Lucius ignored the difficulties in his life. Far from it. Instead, it meant that those difficulties no longer defined his experience. They were just one part of a larger, richer picture. Lucius also noticed how this practice affected his relationships. By focusing on the positive aspects of the people in his life, he found himself more patient, more compassionate, more connected. When his friend Julius forgot to return a borrowed book, instead of feeling annoyed, Lucius reminded himself of all the times Julius had been there for him, offering support and friendship. This simple shift in focus transformed what could have been a source of irritation into an opportunity to strengthen their bond. Over time, Lucius began to extend his gratitude practice beyond his immediate surroundings. He started to appreciate the larger forces at play in his life, the opportunities he had been given, the challenges that had shaped him, the lessons learned from both success and failure. He began to see his life not as a series of disconnected events, but as a coherent whole, where everything, good and bad, had contributed to making him the person he was today. One day, as Lucius was writing in his gratitude journal, he found himself reflecting on one of the most difficult periods of his life, the time when he had lost his previous job. At the time, it had felt like a crushing blow, a failure that shook his confidence and left him questioning his worth. But as he looked back on that experience through the lens of gratitude, he realized how much he had gained from it. The loss of that job had pushed him to reassess his priorities, to seek out new opportunities, and to grow in ways he hadn't anticipated. It had been a painful experience, but it had also been a catalyst for change, one that had ultimately led him to where he was now. For the first time, Lucius felt a deep sense of gratitude for that loss, recognizing it as a turning point in his life. This realization was a powerful one. It showed him that gratitude wasn't just about appreciating the good things in life, but also about finding value in the challenges and hardships. As his gratitude practice became more ingrained, Lucius began to notice another change, a growing sense of contentment. The restless drive for more, for better, for different began to fade. He still had goals and ambitions, but they no longer felt like desperate needs. Instead, they became aspirations to be pursued with patience and joy, knowing that he already had so much to be grateful for. This contentment didn't mean that Lucius stopped striving for improvement, but it did mean that he no longer tied his happiness to external achievements. Whether he reached his goals or not, whether things went according to plan or not, he knew that he could always find something to be grateful for, something to appreciate in the present moment. One evening, as Lucius sat on a park bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he reflected on how much his life had changed. The city around him was still the same, bustling, noisy, full of challenges and opportunities. But his experience of it was entirely different. The gratitude he had cultivated had transformed his perspective, allowing him to see the abundance that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. He thought about the people in his life, the work he did, the challenges he faced, all the things that once felt overwhelming or insufficient. Now, they felt like gifts, each one contributing to the richness of his life. The practice of gratitude had opened his eyes to the beauty and value of the present moment, something he had been too focused on the future or the past to fully appreciate. As Lucius continued to reflect, he realized that gratitude had not only brought him peace and contentment, but had also deepened his resilience. By focusing on what he was grateful for, he had built a reserve of positive energy that helped him navigate the inevitable challenges of life with greater ease. When difficulties arose, he could draw on this reserve, reminding himself of all the good in his life and finding strength in that awareness. Lucius knew that this practice would be a lifelong journey, one that required continuous effort and attention. But he also knew that it was a journey worth taking, one that would continue to bring him closer to the inner peace he sought. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Lucius stood up from the bench, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the day that had passed and for the days yet to come. He knew that there would be challenges ahead, but he also knew that he had the tools to face them: perception, resilience. Chapter 4. Embracing Change. The following weeks brought a sense of calm and stability to Lucius' life. His praise of gratitude had grounded him, allowing him to approach each day with a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. He felt more connected to the present moment, more at peace with himself and the world around him. However, life has a way of testing the very lessons we learn, often in unexpected ways. One morning, Lucius arrived at work to find an unusual tension in the air. His colleagues were huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. There was a sense of unease that he couldn't quite place. As he settled into his desk, his supervisor approached with a grim expression. "Lucius, can I see you in my office?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of discomfort. Lucius nodded, following her into the small, windowless room where so many crucial meetings had taken place over the years. As he sat down, he noticed a stack of papers on the desk, documents that were out of place given the usual orderliness of his supervisor's space. She sighed and looked directly at him. "Lucius, I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Due to restructuring within the company, your position is being eliminated. We've appreciated all your hard work, but this decision is final. I'm truly sorry." The words hit Lucius like a punch to the gut. His job, his steady, reliable job, was gone. The job that had been the cornerstone of his daily life, that had provided him with stability and a sense of purpose, was suddenly being taken away. He felt the ground shift beneath him, as if the foundation on which he had built his life was crumbling. For a moment, Lucius sat in stunned silence. The walls of the office seemed to close in on him, the air heavy with the weight of the news. His mind raced, leaping from one thought to another. How would he pay his bills? What would he do next? How would he tell his family and friends? But then, as if a switch had been flipped, Lucius remembered the teachings of Stoicism that he had been practicing. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs, and exhaled slowly, allowing the tension in his body to dissipate. The words of the Stoics echoed in his mind. Amor fati, the love of fate. It was the acceptance of everything that happens, good or bad, as necessary and beneficial for one's growth. Lucius looked at his supervisor, who was watching him with a mixture of sympathy and concern. "Thank you for letting me know," he said, his voice steady. "I understand that this wasn't an easy decision for you either. I'll begin making arrangements and figuring out my next steps." His supervisor seemed taken aback by his calm response. "If there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask," she offered, clearly relieved that the conversation hadn't escalated into anger or distress. "I appreciate that," Lucius replied, standing up. "I'll take it one day at a time." As he left the office, Lucius felt a strange sense of clarity. The news was undeniably difficult. Losing his job was not something he had anticipated, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead was daunting. But instead of succumbing to panic, he found himself embracing the change. This was a new chapter in his life, one that he hadn't expected, but one that he was determined to face with the same resilience he had cultivated through his Stoic practices. Over the next few days, Lucius began the process of closing out his work responsibilities and preparing for the transition. He updated his resume, reached out to contacts in his network, and began exploring potential opportunities. But beyond the practical steps, Lucius also took time to reflect on what this change meant for him personally. For years, his identity had been closely tied to his job. He had taken pride in his work, in the stability and success it brought him. But now, as he faced the prospect of life without that job, Lucius realized that he was more than his career. His value, his worth, didn't come from his job title or the company he worked for. It came from within. This realization was both liberating and humbling. Lucius understood that change, while often uncomfortable, was a natural part of life. The Stoics taught that everything is in flux, that life is a series of transitions, and that true peace comes not from resisting change, but from embracing it. Lucius began to see this period of uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a setback. It was a chance to reassess his goals, to explore new paths, and to grow in ways he hadn't imagined. He remembered the lessons he had learned about perception and resilience, and he knew that these would serve him well in the days ahead. As the weeks passed, Lucius noticed subtle changes in his outlook. Without the structure of his job to anchor him, he found himself exploring interests and passions that he had previously set aside. He took up writing, something he had always enjoyed but never had time for. He enrolled in an online course on philosophy, eager to deepen his understanding of the Stoic Principles that had already had such a profound impact on his life. He also spent more time with friends and family, nurturing relationships that had sometimes been neglected in the hustle of his professional life. Lucius realized that these connections were far more valuable than any job or career milestone. The conversations, the shared experiences, the support, they were the true riches of his life. One afternoon, as Lucius was walking through the park, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The uncertainty of his future was still present, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like a door opening to new possibilities, new experiences, and new growth. As he walked, he thought about the concept of amor fati, the idea that everything that happens is a part of a greater plan, that even the most difficult challenges can lead to something good. Lucius had always struggled with this idea, finding it hard to accept that pain and loss could be beneficial. But now, as he faced the uncertainty of his future, he began to understand it in a deeper way. The loss of his job had been painful, yes. It had forced him out of his comfort zone, into a place of vulnerability and uncertainty. But it had also given him the opportunity to rediscover himself, to reconnect with what truly mattered, and to embrace change in a way that he had never done before. Lucius realized that change wasn't something to be feared or resisted. It was a natural part of life, and by embracing it, he could find peace, even in the midst of uncertainty. The key was not to cling to the past or to fear the future, but to remain present, to accept each moment as it came, and to trust that everything was unfolding as it should. This acceptance didn't mean that Lucius had all the answers, or that he knew exactly what the future held, but it did mean that he was no longer paralyzed by fear or doubt. He was learning to flow with life, to adapt to whatever came his way, and to find strength in the knowledge that he had the tools to face any challenge. One day, as Lucius was walking through his neighborhood, he noticed a small bookstore that he had passed by countless times but never entered. On a whim, he decided to go in. The shop was quiet, the scent of old books filling the air. As he browsed the shelves, his eyes fell on a book about mindfulness and meditation, practices that had always intrigued him, but that he had never seriously pursued. Lucius picked up the book and began to read. The words resonated with him, speaking of the importance of staying present, of embracing change, and of finding peace in the midst of life's uncertainties. It felt like the perfect complement to the Stoic Principles he had been studying, and he decided to buy the book and explore these practices further. Over the next few weeks, Lucius began incorporating mindfulness and meditation into his daily routine. He found that these practices deepened his sense of acceptance, helping him to remain calm and centered, even as the future remained uncertain. The combination of Stoic wisdom and mindfulness allowed him to navigate change with grace and resilience, finding peace in the present moment. As Lucius continued his journey, he reflected on how far he had come. The loss of his job, which had once felt like a devastating blow, had become a catalyst for transformation. It had forced him to confront his fears, to let go of the past, and to embrace the unknown. And in doing so, he had discovered a strength within himself that he hadn't known existed. Lucius knew that life would continue to bring changes, some welcome, others challenging. But he also knew that he was ready to face whatever came his way. The Stoic principles he had learned, perception, resilience, gratitude, and now the acceptance of change, had given him the tools to navigate life with a sense of calm and confidence. As he looked to the future, Lucius felt a sense of excitement rather than fear. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was ready to embrace it, to learn from it, and to grow. He understood now that change was not something to be feared, but something to be welcomed. For it was through change that he would continue to evolve, to discover new strengths, and to find new opportunities for growth. And so, with a heart full of acceptance and a mind open to the possibilities of the future, Lucius continued his journey. The path was uncertain, but it was one that he was eager to walk, knowing that with each step he was becoming more resilient, more peaceful, and more aligned with the true essence.
Chapter 5. Differentiating between opinion and fact.
As Lucius continued to navigate the uncertainties and changes in his life, he began to encounter a new challenge, one that was more subtle, yet just as disruptive as the external obstacles he had faced. It was the challenge of distinguishing between what was real and what was merely a product of his own mind. The more he reflected on his experiences, the more he realized how often his thoughts were influenced not by objective reality, but by opinions, both his own and those of others. Lucius had always prided himself on being a logical and rational person. Yet, as he delved deeper into Stoic philosophy, he began to recognize how frequently he allowed his emotions to cloud his judgment, leading him to react to situations based on his interpretations rather than the facts. The Stoics taught that much of the distress people experience comes not from the events themselves, but from the opinions they form about those events. One afternoon, as Lucius was sipping a cup of coffee at a local cafe, he recalled a recent conversation with his friend Marcus. They had been discussing their respective job searches, and Marcus had casually mentioned that he had landed an interview with a prestigious firm. Lucius had immediately felt a pang of envy, followed by a wave of self-doubt. Why hadn't he been able to secure such an opportunity? Was he not as qualified? Was he falling behind? These thoughts had lingered with him for days, creating a sense of unease that he couldn't quite shake. But now, as he sat in the cafe reflecting on the Stoic teaching that much of human suffering comes from confusing opinion with fact, Lucius realized what had happened. His reaction to Marcus's news had been based entirely on his own assumptions and opinions. The fact was simple. Marcus had an interview, but Lucius had layered this fact with interpretations that had nothing to do with reality and everything to do with his own insecurities. Determined to apply this insight to his daily life, Lucius began to consciously practice differentiating between opinion and fact. He started with small, everyday situations, paying close attention to how he reacted to the events around him. One morning, as he checked his email, Lucius noticed that a colleague had sent a curt response to a question he had asked the day before. His initial reaction was to feel slighted, assuming that the colleague was annoyed or dismissive. But then he paused and asked himself, "What is the fact here?" The fact was simply that the colleague had sent a brief email. Everything else, the perceived tone, the imagined annoyance, was opinion. By separating fact from opinion, Lucius was able to prevent himself from spiraling into unnecessary negativity. Instead of reacting emotionally, he responded calmly, sending a polite follow-up message to clarify the situation. The colleague's reply was swift and friendly, indicating that there had been no ill will, just a busy day that had led to a short response. This small victory encouraged Lucius to apply the practice to more significant situations. He began to notice how often his thoughts were colored by opinions that were often baseless or exaggerated. When a friend cancelled dinner plans at the last minute, Lucius's first reaction was to feel hurt, assuming that the friend didn't value their time together. But upon reflection, he recognized that this was merely his interpretation. The fact was that his friend had cancelled. The reasons could be numerous and unrelated to their relationship. Rather than letting these assumptions take root, Lucius decided to reach out to his friend and ask if everything was okay. His friend, it turned out, had been dealing with a family emergency and was grateful for Lucius's understanding and concern. By focusing on the facts and approaching the situation with empathy rather than jumping to conclusions, Lucius strengthened the bond with his friend instead of allowing misunderstandings to create distance. The more Lucius practiced differentiating between opinion and fact, the more he noticed how often people, including himself, allowed opinions to drive their emotions and actions. He observed this in the news, on social media, and in everyday conversations. Opinions were often presented as truths, leading to unnecessary conflicts, misunderstandings, and stress. Lucius realized that by learning to separate fact from opinion, he could not only reduce his own stress, but also contribute to a more balanced and reasoned approach to the world around him. One evening, as Lucius was journaling about his day, he reflected on a conversation he had overheard at a grocery store. Two people were discussing a recent political event, and their discussion quickly turned heated as they exchanged opinions, each convinced of their own perspective's validity. Lucius recognized how their debate was fueled not by a disagreement over facts, but by their differing interpretations of those facts. It struck him that much of the discord in the world stemmed from this inability or unwillingness to separate what was objectively true from what was subjectively believed. This realization deepened Lucius's commitment to the Stoic principle of differentiating between opinion and fact. He began to see it not just as a personal practice, but as a necessary skill for navigating a world filled with conflicting viewpoints and information. By grounding himself in what was real and verifiable, Lucius found that he could engage in conversations with greater clarity and less emotional reactivity. He could listen to others' opinions without feeling threatened or defensive because he understood that opinions were just that, opinions, not facts. As Lucius continued to integrate this practice into his life, he noticed a significant reduction in his overall stress levels. Situations that would have previously triggered anxiety or anger now seemed more manageable. When faced with criticism or negative feedback, Lucius no longer reacted defensively. Instead, he examined the facts, what was actually said, what was actually done, and used this information to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. This newfound clarity also began to influence how Lucius interacted with others. He became more mindful of the words he used, careful to distinguish between his own opinions and objective facts. When offering feedback to a colleague or discussing a sensitive topic with a friend, he would preface his statements with, "In my opinion," or "I believe that." This subtle shift in language helped to create a more open and respectful dialogue, where differing viewpoints could be shared without escalating into conflict. One day, Lucius was approached by his neighbor, Callista, who was visibly upset. She had heard a rumor that the apartment building was going to be sold and that all the tenants would be evicted. The rumor had spread quickly, causing panic among the residents. Callista, who had lived in the building for years, was particularly distressed, fearing she would have to leave her home. Lucius listened to her concerns, and instead of reacting to the rumor, he asked, "Do we know if this is a fact? Has anyone confirmed it with the building management?" Callista paused, realizing that she hadn't actually verified the information. She had heard it from another tenant who had heard it from someone else. The rumor had taken on a life of its own, fueled by fear and speculation. "Let's find out the facts before we jump to conclusions," Lucius suggested. Together they went to the building's management office and asked directly about the situation. The manager assured them that there were no plans to sell the building and that the rumor was entirely unfounded. Relieved, Callista thanked Lucius for helping her see the situation clearly before reacting. This experience reinforced for Lucius the importance of not letting opinions, whether his own or others, dictate his emotions or actions. By focusing on the facts, he was able to navigate what could have been a stressful situation with calm and clarity. It also reminded him of how easily misinformation could spread and how crucial it was to seek the truth before forming judgments. As Lucius continued his journey, he found that this practice of differentiating between opinion and fact had a ripple effect in his life. It not only helped him maintain his emotional equilibrium, but also improved his relationships, his decision-making, and his overall sense of well-being. He became less reactive, more thoughtful, and more at peace with himself and the world around him. The lessons he had learned through this practice were invaluable. Lucius realized that much of the turmoil people experience comes from confusing opinion with fact, from allowing subjective interpretations to overshadow objective reality. By honing the ability to separate the two, he had gained a powerful tool for navigating life's complexities with greater ease and understanding. One evening, as Lucius sat on his balcony watching the sunset, he reflected on how far he had come. The world around him was full of opinions, some well-founded, others not, but he no longer felt at their mercy. He had learned to anchor himself in the truth, to seek out facts and to approach each situation with a clear mind. This practice had brought him a sense of inner calm, a peace that came from knowing that he could trust his own discernment. Lucius knew that this journey was ongoing, that the practice of differentiating between opinion and fact would be a lifelong endeavor. But he was committed to it, knowing that it was a vital part of his path toward inner peace and resilience. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Lucius felt a deep sense of gratitude for the wisdom he had gained. He understood now that the world was not as chaotic as it once seemed, that much of the confusion and conflict came not from the events themselves, but from the way they were perceived and interpreted. And so, with a heart full of clarity and a mind grounded in reality, Lucius continued his journey, knowing that he was better equipped than ever to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path was clear, the way forward illuminated by the light of understanding, and Lucius felt ready to embrace the next chapter of his life with confidence and peace. Chapter 6. Practicing Detachment. As Lucius's journey into Stoicism deepened, he began to explore one of its most challenging yet transformative principles: detachment. The idea of practicing detachment was not new to him, but truly understanding and applying it in his life required a level of introspection and discipline that he had yet to fully master. Detachment, as the Stoics taught, was not about withdrawing from life or becoming indifferent to the world around him. Instead, it was about engaging fully with life while maintaining a healthy distance from the outcomes. It was about caring deeply, but not letting his happiness or peace depend on things beyond his control, people, possessions, or even his own desires. Lucius had always been a passionate person. He cared deeply about his work, his relationships, and his goals. But he also realized that this passion often led to attachment, an attachment that caused him stress and disappointment when things didn't go as planned. The more he reflected on this, the more he saw how his attachments had become obstacles to his peace of mind. One evening, as Lucius sat in his apartment, he thought about the things he was most attached to. His mind immediately went to his career. Despite the recent loss of his job, he had already begun to identify with his new pursuit of finding a better position, attaching his self-worth to the outcome of his job search. The idea that his happiness was tied to securing a particular job or achieving a certain status was something he hadn't questioned until now. He also thought about his relationships, how he had often placed his happiness in the hands of others, expecting them to fulfill his needs or validate his worth. This realization was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating. It showed him that much of his emotional turmoil stemmed from placing his well-being in the control of things and people outside of himself. Determined to break free from these attachments, Lucius decided to start practicing detachment in small but meaningful ways. He began with his possessions. Although he had never been overly materialistic, Lucius recognized that he had accumulated a fair amount of belongings over the years, things that, while useful, had also become symbols of success or comfort that he was reluctant to part with. One weekend, Lucius decided to declutter his apartment. He started with his closet, pulling out clothes he hadn't worn in years, shoes that were more about status than comfort, and gadgets that had lost their novelty. As he sorted through these items, he felt a mix of emotions, nostalgia, reluctance, and a surprising sense of relief. He realized that many of these possessions had been weighing him down, not just physically, but mentally. As he placed the items into boxes for donation, Lucius felt a lightness that he hadn't expected. The act of letting go was freeing, allowing him to detach from the idea that these things defined him or added to his value. He was beginning to understand that his worth was not tied to what he owned, but to who he was. Next, Lucius turned his attention to his digital life. He had noticed how easy it was to become attached to social media, to the constant stream of information, validation, and distraction it provided. He decided to take a break from it, setting aside specific times each day to check his messages and catch up on the news, but otherwise remaining offline. The first few days were difficult. Lucius found himself reaching for his phone out of habit, feeling a sense of loss at not being constantly connected. But as the days passed, he began to notice a change. Without the constant noise of social media, his mind felt clearer, his thoughts more focused. He had more time for reflection, for reading, for simply being present in the moment. The detachment from his digital life brought a sense of peace that he hadn't anticipated. But the most challenging aspect of detachment for Lucius was in his relationships. He had always been someone who valued close connections, who found joy and meaning in his interactions with others. However, he also realized that he had often placed too much of his emotional well-being in the hands of others, relying on their approval, affection, or attention to feel validated. Lucius decided to approach his relationships with a new mindset. He would continue to care deeply for the people in his life, but he would practice detachment by not allowing his happiness to depend on their actions or feelings. He would love freely without expecting anything in return, and he would accept that people were on their own paths, with their own struggles and choices that he couldn't control. One of the first opportunities to practice this came when his close friend Julius became distant. Lucius had noticed that Julius wasn't as responsive to messages and had cancelled plans several times. In the past, this would have upset Lucius, leading him to feel hurt and wonder what he had done wrong. But now, he reminded himself that Julius's behavior wasn't something he could control, and it wasn't a reflection of his own worth. Instead of reacting with frustration or hurt, Lucius decided to reach out to Julius with understanding and compassion, without expecting a particular response. He sent a simple message, letting Julius know he was there if he needed anything, but giving him the space to respond in his own time. A few days later, Julius called, apologizing for his distance and explaining that he had been dealing with some personal issues that he hadn't been ready to talk about. Lucius listened without judgment, offering support, but not pressing for details. He realized that by practicing detachment, he had allowed the relationship to continue on its own terms, without forcing it to meet his expectations. This experience reinforced for Lucius the power of detachment in relationships. It didn't mean caring less. It meant caring without becoming attached to a specific outcome. It meant being present and supportive, while also respecting the autonomy of others and understanding that their actions were not a reflection of his value. As Lucius continued to practice detachment, he noticed a growing sense of inner peace. The things that once caused him stress, the uncertainty of his job search, the fluctuations in his relationships, the constant distractions of modern life, began to lose their hold on him. He was no longer constantly seeking validation or security in external things. Instead, he found that his sense of peace and contentment came from within, from a place that was unaffected by the ups and downs of life. One day, as Lucius was sitting in a park, watching the leaves fall from the trees, he reflected on the nature of detachment. He realized that detachment was not about avoiding life or withdrawing from it. It was about engaging with life fully, but with a sense of freedom. It was about being involved, caring and loving, but without the need to cling or control. It was about trusting that whatever happened, he would be okay, because his happiness was not tied to any one thing or person, but to his own inner state. Lucius thought about the Stoic concept of ataraxia, the state of serene calmness and peace of mind that comes from being free from disturbance. He was beginning to understand that this state wasn't achieved by eliminating desires or emotions, but by detaching from the need for specific outcomes. It was about living with intention and purpose, while also accepting that not everything was within his control. As he continued to sit in the park, the sun setting behind the trees, Lucius felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken. The practice of detachment had taught him to let go of the things that once weighed him down, to find freedom in the midst of life's challenges, and to trust in the flow of life. He knew that there would always be things that tempted him to cling or control, but he also knew that he had the tools to navigate those temptations with grace and wisdom. That evening, as Lucius walked home, he felt a profound sense of peace. The world around him was still full of uncertainties, but he no longer felt the need to grasp at control or security. He had learned to embrace life with an open heart, to engage fully while also practicing the art of letting go. And in that letting go, he had found a freedom that was more precious than anything he had ever owned or achieved. As Lucius continued on his journey, he carried with him the lessons of detachment, knowing that they would guide him through whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. He was no longer afraid of losing what he had, because he understood that his true peace and happiness came not from what he possessed, but from his ability to live fully and freely, detached from the need for specific outcomes. And so, with a heart full of peace and a mind free from the weight of attachment, Lucius continued to walk his path, ready to face the future with a sense of calm, confidence, and unwavering inner strength. The journey was far from over, but he knew that he was on the right path, the path of true detachment and ultimately true freedom. Chapter 7. Maintaining a Moral Compass. As Lucius journeyed deeper into the teachings of Stoicism, he began to realize that, while resilience, detachment, and perception were essential for inner peace, they needed to be anchored in something more profound, something that would guide his actions and decisions, even in the most challenging circumstances. This something was his moral compass, a set of core principles and values that would keep him grounded and ensure that his pursuit of peace and happiness did not come at the cost of his integrity. Stoicism placed great importance on virtue, seeing it as the highest good and the foundation of a life well lived. The four cardinal virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, were not just ideals to aspire to, but essential elements of a meaningful and fulfilling life. Lucius had always considered himself a principled person, but as he reflected on his journey, he realized that living by these virtues required more than just good intentions. It required constant vigilance, self-reflection, and the courage to act according to one's values, even when it was difficult. One morning, Lucius received a call from an old colleague, Marcellus, who had recently started his own consulting firm. Marcellus was sharp, ambitious, and well-connected, and Lucius had always respected his business acumen. During the call, Marcellus offered Lucius a lucrative opportunity, a consulting project that promised a substantial income and the potential for long-term collaboration. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect opportunity, especially considering Lucius's recent unemployment. However, as Marcellus explained the details, Lucius felt a twinge of unease. The project involved working with a company that had a questionable reputation. There had been rumors of unethical practices, particularly regarding their treatment of employees and their environmental impact. Marcellus assured Lucius that these were just rumors, that the company had been unfairly maligned, and that the project was an excellent chance to advance his career. Lucius listened carefully, but the unease persisted. After the call, he sat down with his journal and began to reflect. He knew that this decision was not just about money or career advancement. It was about whether he was willing to compromise his values for the sake of personal gain. As he pondered the situation, Lucius thought about the Stoic virtues, particularly justice and wisdom. Justice, in the Stoic sense, was about fairness, integrity, and doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Wisdom was about making sound decisions based on careful thought and a clear understanding of the consequences. Lucius realized that if he took the project, he would be associating himself with a company whose practices were not aligned with his values. Even if the rumors were untrue, he would still be compromising his principles by prioritizing financial gain over ethical considerations. The Stoics taught that true peace of mind came not from external success, but from living a life consistent with one's values. Lucius knew that if he accepted the project, he might gain wealth, but he would lose something far more valuable: his sense of integrity. The decision weighed heavily on him, but he knew what he had to do. The next day, Lucius called Marcellus and respectfully declined the offer. Marcellus was surprised, even disappointed, but Lucius explained that he couldn't take on a project that conflicted with his values. Marcellus tried to persuade him, emphasizing the financial benefits and the potential for future opportunities, but Lucius remained firm. After the call, Lucius felt a mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a lingering doubt about whether he had made the right choice. The financial security the project promised would have been a significant relief. But as the day went on, he found that his initial doubts were replaced by a deep sense of peace. He knew he had made the right decision, one that aligned with his principles and the kind of person he wanted to be. This experience reaffirmed for Lucius the importance of maintaining a strong moral compass. He realized that life would continue to present him with difficult choices, where the path of least resistance would often be at odds with his values. The challenge was to stay true to those values, even when it meant making sacrifices or facing criticism. Lucius also understood that maintaining a moral compass required continuous self-reflection and a willingness to hold himself accountable. It wasn't enough to declare his values. He had to live by them, day in and day out. This meant regularly examining his actions and decisions, asking himself whether they were aligned with the virtues he aspired to embody. One evening, as Lucius was walking through the city, he noticed a small group of people gathered around a street performer. The performer, an elderly man, was playing the violin with remarkable skill, his music filling the air with a sense of warmth and beauty. As Lucius listened, he saw a young boy approach the man, holding out a few coins. The old man smiled, nodded in thanks, and continued playing. As Lucius watched this simple exchange, he was reminded of the virtue of temperance, the ability to practice self-control and moderation. The old man, despite his talent, lived simply, finding joy in sharing his music with others. Lucius reflected on how often people, including himself, sought happiness in excess, whether it was money, status, or material possessions, only to find that these things brought temporary satisfaction at best. He realized that temperance was not just about restraining oneself from overindulgence. It was about understanding what truly mattered in life and aligning one's actions with that understanding. The old man's contentment, despite his modest circumstances, was a powerful reminder that true happiness came from within, from living in accordance with one's values and finding meaning in the simple, everyday moments of life. As Lucius continued his walk, he thought about how maintaining a moral compass also involved the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was unpopular or difficult. He recalled a recent situation at a community meeting where a controversial issue had been discussed: plans to develop a green space into commercial property. Many in the community were in favor of the development because of the potential economic benefits, but others, including Lucius, believed that preserving the green space was more important for the well-being of the neighborhood. During the meeting, tensions ran high, with heated arguments on both sides. Lucius knew that speaking out against the development would not be popular, but he also knew it was the right thing to do. When it was his turn to speak, Lucius voiced his concerns, emphasizing the importance of preserving natural spaces for future generations and the long-term benefits of environmental stewardship. His speech was met with mixed reactions. Some applauded his stance, while others dismissed his concerns as idealistic. But Lucius didn't regret his decision to speak up. He knew that maintaining a moral compass meant having the courage to advocate for what he believed in, even when it was challenging or unpopular. Over the following weeks, Lucius continued to practice living according to his moral compass. He made a conscious effort to incorporate the Stoic virtues into his daily life, reflecting on how each decision, big or small, aligned with his values. He found that this practice not only brought him a sense of inner peace, but also helped him navigate the complexities of life with greater clarity and confidence. Lucius also began to notice how his commitment to living by his values influenced those around him. His friends, colleagues, and even acquaintances saw the consistency and integrity with which he approached his life, and many were inspired by his example. Lucius didn't seek recognition or praise, but he appreciated knowing that his actions were having a positive impact on others. One day, Lucius received an unexpected message from Marcellus. Since their last conversation, Marcellus had begun to reconsider the direction of his consulting firm. He admitted that Lucius's decision to turn down the project had made him reflect on his own values and the kind of business he wanted to build. Marcellus thanked Lucius for reminding him that success didn't have to come at the cost of integrity, and that it was possible to achieve both by staying true to one's principles. Lucius was touched by Marcellus's message. It reinforced his belief that living according to a moral compass was not just about personal integrity, but also about contributing to the greater good. By making choices based on his values, Lucius had influenced someone else to do the same, creating a ripple effect that could lead to positive change. As Lucius sat down to write in his journal that evening, he reflected on the journey he had undertaken. He realized that maintaining a moral compass was not a one-time decision, but a continuous process, one that required daily commitment, self-reflection, and the courage to act according to one's principles. He thought about the Stoic philosophers who had faced their own challenges and temptations, and how they had emphasized the importance of virtue in living a meaningful and fulfilling life. Lucius knew that he was not perfect, that there would be times when he would struggle or falter, but he was committed to living by his values to the best of his ability. As the night grew darker and the city outside his window quieted, Lucius felt a deep sense of contentment. He knew that the path he had chosen was not always the easiest, but it was the one that aligned with his true self. By maintaining his moral compass, he had found a sense of purpose and direction that would guide him through whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. And so, with a heart full of integrity and a mind committed to living by the virtues he held dear, Lucius continued his journey, knowing that each step he took brought him closer to the life of meaning, peace, and fulfillment that he sought. The road was long, but it was one he was proud to walk, guided by the steady light of his moral compass. Chapter 8. Fostering Self-Discipline. With each lesson Lucius learned, he felt a growing sense of inner strength and resilience. He had come to understand the importance of perception, gratitude, detachment, and maintaining a moral compass. However, as he continued to navigate the complexities of life, he realized that these principles, as powerful as they were, required a foundation of self-discipline to be truly effective. Self-discipline, Lucius understood, was the glue that held all these virtues together. Without it, Even the best intentions could fall apart under the pressures and distractions of daily life. The Stoics had long emphasized the importance of self-discipline, seeing it as essential to achieving both personal mastery and a life of virtue. For Lucius, fostering self-discipline was about creating the habits and routines that would allow him to consistently live according to his values and principles. Lucius had always considered himself a reasonably disciplined person. He was punctual, organized, and dedicated to his work. But as he delved deeper into the concept of self-discipline, he realized that true discipline went beyond mere adherence to schedules and deadlines. It was about mastering one's desires, impulses, and emotions, about choosing long-term well-being over short-term gratification. To begin this process, Lucius decided to examine the areas of his life where his discipline was weakest. He identified 3 key areas: his physical health, his use of time, and his mental focus. Each of these areas, he realized, was critical to his overall well-being and success, yet each was also prone to lapses in discipline that undermined his goals. First, Lucius focused on his physical health. He had always been somewhat active, but his exercise routine was inconsistent, often disrupted by work or social commitments. He knew that physical health was not just about maintaining a certain appearance or fitness level. It was about cultivating the energy and vitality needed to live a fulfilling life. Lucius decided to create a structured exercise regimen that would be non-negotiable, something he would commit to regardless of how busy or tired he felt. He started with simple goals: exercising for 30 minutes every morning, alternating between cardio and strength training. He also committed to eating healthier, reducing his intake of processed foods and sugars, and incorporating more whole, nutritious foods into his diet. The first few weeks were challenging. There were days when Lucius didn't feel like getting out of bed early to exercise, or when the temptation of fast food seemed too strong to resist. But each time, he reminded himself of the importance of self-discipline, not just for achieving his fitness goals, but for building the mental toughness that would carry over into other areas of his life. Over time, Lucius noticed a significant change. His body felt stronger, his energy levels were higher, and he found himself more focused and productive throughout the day. But more importantly, he felt a growing sense of accomplishment and self-respect. By sticking to his commitments, he was proving to himself that he could rely on his own discipline to achieve his goals. Next, Lucius turned his attention to how he used his time. He had always been busy, but he realized that being busy was not the same as being productive. He often found himself distracted by emails, social media, and other interruptions that broke his focus and prevented him from working on the tasks that truly mattered. To address this, Lucius adopted a practice he had read about in a book on time management, the Pomodoro technique. This method involved working in focused bursts of 25 minutes, followed by a short break. During each burst, Lucius would focus entirely on one task, with no distractions allowed. The break allowed him to recharge, reducing the risk of burnout. Lucius also began to prioritize his tasks more effectively, using a method known as the Eisenhower matrix. This involved categorizing tasks into 4 quadrants: urgent and important, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, and neither urgent nor important. By focusing on the tasks in the first 2 categories, Lucius ensured that he was dedicating his time and energy to what truly mattered. As Lucius implemented these techniques, he found that his productivity increased dramatically. He was able to accomplish more in less time, and the quality of his work improved as well. But beyond the tangible results, Lucius noticed how these practices strengthened his self-discipline. By controlling how he spent his time, he was also gaining greater control over his life. The final area Lucius focused on was his mental discipline. This was perhaps the most challenging, as it required him to confront the thoughts, emotions, and impulses that often undermined his efforts to live according to his values. Lucius knew that self-discipline wasn't just about what he did, it was about how he thought and felt. To cultivate mental discipline, Lucius began practicing mindfulness meditation. Each morning, after his exercise routine, he would sit quietly for 15 minutes, focusing on his breath and observing his thoughts without judgment. The goal was not to suppress his thoughts or emotions, but to become more aware of them, to understand them without being controlled by them. At first, Lucius found the practice difficult. His mind would wander, pulling him into worries about the future or regrets about the past. But gradually, he began to notice a change. He became more aware of the patterns in his thinking, more attuned to the triggers that led to stress, anxiety, or distraction. By observing these patterns, he was able to respond to them more effectively, choosing how to react rather than being swept away by his emotions. This practice of mindfulness also helped Lucius in moments of temptation. When he felt the urge to procrastinate, to indulge in unhealthy food, or to skip his exercise routine, he would take a moment to pause and reflect. He would ask himself whether the short-term pleasure was worth the long-term consequences, and more often than not, he found the strength to stay disciplined. As Lucius continued to develop his self-discipline, he noticed how it began to influence other areas of his life. His relationships improved as he became more patient and less reactive. His sense of purpose deepened as he focused more on his long-term goals rather than being distracted by immediate desires. And his overall well-being improved as he became more consistent in his healthy habits. One day, as Lucius was reflecting on his journey, he realized that self-discipline was not just about achieving specific goals, it was about creating a life of intentionality. By disciplining his mind, body, and time, he was able to live in a way that was aligned with his values and aspirations. He was no longer a slave to his impulses or circumstances. He was the master of his own life. Lucius also understood that self-discipline was a continuous process. There would always be challenges, temptations, and setbacks, but by committing to the practice of discipline, he was building a foundation that would support him through whatever life threw his way. He knew that discipline wasn't about being rigid or harsh with himself. It was about being kind to himself by making choices that would lead to long-term well-being and fulfillment. As Lucius continued to walk the path of self-discipline, he found that the other Stoic principles he had learned became easier to apply. His ability to maintain a clear perception, practice gratitude, embrace change, and live according to his moral compass all depended on his discipline. It was the bedrock upon which his entire philosophy of life was built. One evening, as Lucius sat in his apartment, enjoying a quiet moment of reflection, he thought about how far he had come. The journey had not been easy, and there were still many challenges ahead, but he felt a deep sense of confidence in his ability to face them. He knew that self-discipline was not about perfection. It was about progress. It was about making small, consistent choices that added up to a life of meaning and purpose. Lucius also recognized that self-discipline was not something he had to do alone. He found support and inspiration in the teachings of the Stoics, in the practices of mindfulness and meditation, and in the encouragement of friends and mentors who shared his values. By surrounding himself with positive influences, Lucius was able to stay on track, even when the road was difficult. As the night deepened and the city outside his window quieted, Lucius felt a profound sense of peace. He knew that the path of self-discipline was a lifelong journey, one that would require continuous effort and dedication. But he also knew that it was a journey worth taking, one that would lead him to the life of inner peace and fulfillment he sought. And so, with a heart full of determination and a mind committed to living according to his values, Lucius continued his journey, knowing that each step he took was bringing him closer to the person he wanted to be. The road was long, but it was one he was proud to walk, guided by the principles of self-discipline and the wisdom of the Stoics. As Lucius prepared for bed that night, he smiled to himself, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to practice and strengthen his discipline. The journey was far from over, but he felt ready to face whatever came his way, with the confidence that he had the tools and the discipline to navigate life's complexities with grace and resilience. Chapter 9. Reflecting on Mortality. As Lucius progressed in his Stoic journey, he encountered one of the most profound and often unsettling concepts in the philosophy, the reflection on mortality, known as memento mori. This principle, which encourages individuals to remember that they are mortal and that life is fleeting, was not meant to evoke fear, but to inspire a deeper appreciation for the present moment, and to align one's actions with what truly mattered. The idea of reflecting on mortality had always been uncomfortable for Lucius. Like many people, he had spent most of his life avoiding thoughts of death, preferring to focus on the future and the goals he hoped to achieve. But as he delved deeper into Stoicism, he began to understand that embracing the reality of death was not morbid or pessimistic. Instead, it was a way to live more fully and authentically. The Stoics believed that by acknowledging the impermanence of life, one could develop a clearer sense of purpose and a stronger commitment to living according to one's values. Lucius realized that if he could come to terms with his mortality, he might be able to free himself from the anxieties and distractions that often clouded his mind, allowing him to focus on what was truly important. One day, as Lucius was walking through a nearby park, he noticed the changing colors of the leaves. Autumn had arrived, and the trees were shedding their vibrant green for shades of orange, red, and gold. The crisp air and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot brought a sense of tranquility, but also a reminder of the cycle of life and death. As he continued his walk, Lucius thought about how the seasons mirrored the stages of life. Spring and summer represented youth and growth, while autumn and winter symbolized aging and the eventual end. This natural cycle was something everyone experienced, yet it was often pushed to the back of people's minds, as if ignoring it could somehow delay the inevitable. Lucius found a bench and sat down, watching as the wind gently carried the fallen leaves across the ground. He began to reflect on his own life, on the moments that had brought him joy and the challenges that had tested him. He thought about the people he had lost, family members, friends, mentors, each of whom had left an indelible mark on his life. Their absence was a reminder of the fragility of life, but also of its preciousness. As Lucius continued to reflect, he remembered the Stoic practice of memento mori. The phrase, which translates to "remember you must die," was not meant to be a source of fear, but a call to live with urgency and purpose. The Stoics believed that by contemplating death regularly, one could strip away the trivial concerns and distractions that often dominated life, focusing instead on what truly mattered. Lucius realized that much of his anxiety and stress came from worrying about things that, in the grand scheme of life, were insignificant. The pressures of work, the pursuit of material success, the need for approval from others. These were all things that seemed important in the moment, but would ultimately fade with time. Reflecting on mortality helped him see that life was too short to be consumed by such concerns. Determined to embrace this Stoic practice, Lucius began incorporating memento mori into his daily routine. Each morning, as he prepared for the day, he would take a few moments to meditate on the fact that his time on earth was limited. He would remind himself that today could be his last and that he should live it fully with intention and gratitude. This practice had a profound effect on how Lucius approached his life. He found that by acknowledging his mortality, he became more present, more engaged with the world around him. The small annoyances and frustrations that once occupied his mind no longer held the same power over him. Instead, he focused on making the most of each day, on nurturing his relationships, and on living in a way that aligned with his values. One evening, Lucius received a phone call from an old friend, Cassia, whom he hadn't spoken to in years. Cassia shared the news that a mutual friend, Antonius, had passed away unexpectedly. The news hit Lucius hard. Antonius had been a close friend during their university days, and although they had drifted apart over the years, Lucius had always thought there would be time to reconnect. As Lucius sat quietly after the call, he felt a deep sense of loss, not just for Antonius, but for the opportunities missed, the conversations never had, and the moments that would never come. Reflecting on mortality had prepared him intellectually for the reality of death, but experiencing it firsthand brought the lesson into sharp focus. Lucius realized that he had been living under the assumption that there would always be more time to achieve his goals, to mend relationships, to enjoy life's pleasures. But Antonius's death reminded him that time was not guaranteed. The future was uncertain, and the only time he truly had was the present moment. Determined not to let this realization slip away, Lucius decided to take action. He reached out to friends and family members he hadn't spoken to in a while, rekindling relationships that had faded over time. He made an effort to express his gratitude to the people in his life, letting them know how much they meant to him. He also took stock of his own life, reassessing his goals and making sure they aligned with what he truly valued. One of the most significant changes Lucius made was in how he spent his time. He had always been driven, constantly working toward the next achievement, the next milestone, but reflecting on mortality helped him see that life was not just about achieving goals, it was about living in a way that was meaningful and fulfilling. He began to prioritize experiences that brought him joy and fulfillment, spending time with loved ones, exploring new interests, and simply enjoying the beauty of the world around him. Lucius also began to approach his work with a different mindset. Rather than seeing it as a means to an end, he focused on finding meaning and purpose in the work itself. He sought out projects that aligned with his values and allowed him to make a positive impact on others. By doing so, he found that his work became more than just a way to earn a living. It became a source of fulfillment and a way to contribute to something greater than himself. As Lucius continued to practice memento mori, he found that his fear of death began to diminish. It was not that he no longer valued life or wanted to live, quite the opposite. By accepting the reality of his mortality, he was able to live more fully, with a greater sense of purpose and clarity. He no longer wasted time on trivial concerns or allowed fear to dictate his actions. Instead, he embraced each day as a gift, a precious opportunity to live according to his values and to make the most of the time he had. One day, as Lucius was sitting in his favorite cafe, enjoying a cup of tea and reflecting on his journey, he was approached by a young man who had been watching him from across the room. The young man introduced himself as Valerius and explained that he had been struggling with anxiety and a sense of aimlessness in his life. He had noticed Lucius's calm demeanor and wanted to know if he had any advice on how to find peace and purpose. Lucius listened to Valerius's concerns and shared some of the Stoic principles that had helped him on his own journey, including the practice of memento mori. He explained that by accepting the reality of death and the impermanence of life, one could free oneself from the constant worry and fear that often held people back. Instead of being paralyzed by the uncertainty of the future, one could focus on living fully in the present, making the most of each moment and aligning one's actions with what truly mattered. Valerius thanked Lucius for his wisdom and left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. As Lucius watched him go, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had been able to help someone else on their own journey. It reminded him of the importance of sharing the lessons he had learned, of passing on the wisdom of the Stoics to others who could benefit from it. As Lucius walked home that evening, he reflected on how much his life had changed since he had begun practicing memento mori. He no longer feared death, nor did he waste time on things that didn't truly matter. Instead, he focused on living in a way that was meaningful and fulfilling, knowing that each day was a gift, and that the time he had was precious. Lucius knew that his journey was far from over, and that there would always be new challenges and lessons to learn. But he also knew that by reflecting on his mortality, he had gained a sense of clarity and purpose that would guide him through whatever lay ahead. He was no longer afraid of the future because he had learned to live fully in the present, to embrace each moment with gratitude and intention. As the night fell and Lucius reached his apartment, he felt a deep sense of peace. The world around him was still full of uncertainties, but he no longer felt the need to control or resist them. He had learned to accept the impermanence of life, to find beauty in the fleeting moments, and to live in a way that was true to himself and his values. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a mind at peace with the reality of his mortality, Lucius continued his journey, knowing that each day was an opportunity to live fully, to love deeply, and to make the most of the time he had. The road was uncertain, but it was one he was ready to walk, guided by the wisdom of the Stoics and the knowledge that life was precious and that every moment was a gift. Chapter 10. Seeking Wisdom Through Continuous Learning. The lessons Lucius had learned on his journey thus far had transformed him in profound ways. He had become more resilient, more at peace with himself, and more in tune with his values. But as he reflected on the changes he had undergone, he realized that his growth had only been possible because of his openness to learning from his experiences, from the teachings of the Stoics, and from the people around him. Lucius understood that the pursuit of wisdom was a lifelong journey, one that required continuous learning and self-reflection. The Stoics valued wisdom as the highest virtue, seeing it as the key to living a good life. They believed that wisdom was not just about acquiring knowledge, but about understanding oneself, others, and the world in a deeper, more meaningful way. Lucius had always been curious, a seeker of knowledge, but he now saw that wisdom was more than just accumulating facts or mastering skills. It was about developing the ability to see the world clearly, to make sound judgments, and to live in accordance with one's principles. Seeking wisdom required humility, the recognition that no matter how much one knew, there was always more to learn. With this understanding, Lucius committed himself to the continuous pursuit of wisdom. He began by expanding his reading, seeking out books that challenged his perspectives and deepened his understanding of the world. He read not only the works of the Stoics, but also those of other philosophers, historians, and thinkers from different cultures and eras. Each new book was an opportunity to gain insight, to see the world through different eyes, and to refine his own beliefs and values. One day, while browsing in a bookstore, Lucius came across a book on Eastern philosophy. The teachings of Buddhism, in particular, intrigued him. He saw parallels between the Stoic focus on inner peace and the Buddhist emphasis on detachment from desire. Lucius decided to delve into these teachings, curious to see how they could complement the Stoic principles he had already embraced. As he studied the teachings of the Buddha, Lucius found that they resonated deeply with him. The Buddhist concepts of mindfulness, compassion, and the impermanence of all things echoed the lessons he had learned from the Stoics, yet they also offered new perspectives and practices that enriched his understanding. Lucius began to incorporate mindfulness meditation more deeply into his daily routine, using it as a tool to cultivate awareness and presence in every moment. Through this exploration, Lucius realized that wisdom was not confined to any one tradition or philosophy. It was universal, found in the teachings of all cultures and teams, and it was available to anyone who sought it with an open mind and heart. This realization deepened his commitment to continuous learning, not just as a means of personal growth, but as a way to connect with the broader human experience. Lucius also sought wisdom through conversations with others. He began attending discussion groups and seminars, where he could engage with people who shared his interests in philosophy, ethics, and personal development. These discussions challenged him to think critically, to defend his ideas, and to consider perspectives different from his own. He found that by engaging with others, he was able to refine his understanding and grow in ways that solitary study could not achieve. One evening, after a particularly stimulating discussion on the nature of virtue, Lucius found himself reflecting on the importance of mentorship. Throughout his life, he had been fortunate to have teachers and mentors who had guided him, offering wisdom and support when he needed it most. These relationships had been invaluable, providing him with insights and encouragement that had shaped his journey. Inspired by this reflection, Lucius decided to seek out a mentor who could help him deepen his understanding of Stoicism and its application to modern life. After some searching, he found an older man named Tiberius, a retired professor of philosophy who had spent decades studying and teaching Stoic principles. Tiberius was known not only for his deep knowledge, but also for his kindness and humility, qualities that immediately drew Lucius to him. Lucius reached out to Tiberius, and after a few conversations, the two began meeting regularly. These meetings became a source of great inspiration and learning for Lucius. Tiberius shared not only his knowledge of Stoic texts, but also his personal experiences, illustrating how Stoic principles had guided him through the challenges of life. He encouraged Lucius to continue questioning, exploring, and learning, reminding him that wisdom was not a destination but a journey. Under Tiberius's mentorship, Lucius grew in both knowledge and character. He learned to apply Stoic principles more deeply in his daily life, finding new ways to practice virtue, resilience, and compassion. Tiberius also encouraged Lucius to mentor others, passing on what he had learned to those who were just beginning their own journeys. Taking this advice to heart, Lucius began volunteering at a local community center where he led discussions on Stoic philosophy and its relevance to modern life. He found that teaching others not only reinforced his own understanding, but also brought him great joy. The conversations with his students were enriching, offering new insights and perspectives that Lucius hadn't considered before. One of Lucius's students, a young woman named Livia, was particularly eager to learn. She had recently gone through a difficult breakup and was struggling with feelings of loss and confusion. Lucius introduced her to the Stoic concept of amor fati, the love of fate, and explained how embracing life's challenges as opportunities for growth could help her find peace and purpose. Over time, Lucius watched as Livia began to apply these teachings in her own life, growing stronger and more resilient with each passing day. Seeing her progress reminded Lucius of the transformative power of wisdom, not just for oneself, but for others as well. It reinforced his belief that the pursuit of wisdom was not a solitary endeavor. It was a shared journey that connected people across time and space. As Lucius continued to seek wisdom, he also made a conscious effort to reflect on his own experiences. He kept a journal where he recorded his thoughts, insights, and observations. This practice of reflection allowed him to see patterns in his behavior, to identify areas where he still needed to grow, and to celebrate the progress he had made. It was a way of holding himself accountable to his values and ensuring that he continued to learn from both his successes and his mistakes. One day, as Lucius was writing in his journal, he reflected on a recent experience that had challenged his understanding of humility. He had been working on a project that he was particularly proud of, and when it was completed, he received praise from his colleagues. However, in the days that followed, he noticed a subtle shift in his attitude. He began to feel a sense of superiority, a quiet pride that he was better than others because of his achievement. Recognizing this feeling, Lucius turned to the Stoic teachings on humility. He reminded himself that wisdom was not about being better than others, but about striving to be the best version of oneself. True wisdom required humility, the acknowledgement that no matter how much one learned or achieved, there was always more to understand, more to improve, and more to give. This reflection helped Lucius realign his focus, shifting from external validation to internal growth. He realized that wisdom was not about accumulating accolades or achievements, but about living a life of virtue, guided by a commitment to continuous learning and self-improvement. As Lucius continued to reflect, he thought about the role of challenges and obstacles in his journey. He had faced many difficulties, from the loss of his job to the death of his friend Antonius, but he had come to see these challenges as opportunities for growth. Each obstacle had forced him to dig deeper, to question his assumptions, and to refine his understanding of the world. In this way, challenges were not hindrances to wisdom, but essential parts of the journey. With this mindset, Lucius began to approach each day with a renewed sense of curiosity and openness. He saw every experience, whether joyful or difficult, as an opportunity to learn and grow. He sought out new challenges, knowing that they would push him to expand his understanding and develop new skills. And he remained humble, recognizing that the pursuit of wisdom was a lifelong journey, one that required continuous effort and dedication. One evening, as Lucius walked through the city, he reflected on how far he had come. The world around him was full of noise and distractions, but he felt a deep sense of calm and clarity. He knew that the pursuit of wisdom had brought him to this place, and he was grateful for the journey he had undertaken. As the night sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Lucius felt a profound sense of connection to something greater than himself. He realized that wisdom was not just about personal growth. It was about understanding one's place in the world, about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things, and about living in a way that honored that connection. Lucius knew that his journey was far from over, and that there would always be new lessons to learn, new challenges to face, and new opportunities for growth. But he also knew that he was on the right path, the path of continuous learning, guided by the pursuit of wisdom and the desire to live a life of meaning and purpose. As Lucius walked home that evening, he felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to face it, armed with the wisdom he had gained and the knowledge that his journey was just beginning. The pursuit of wisdom was a lifelong endeavor, and Lucius was committed to it, knowing that it would lead him to a life of fulfillment, inner peace, and true understanding. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a mind open to the endless possibilities of learning, Lucius continued his journey, knowing that each step brought him closer to the life of wisdom and virtue he sought. The road was long, but it was one he was eager to walk, guided by the principles. The journey continues. Lucius had come a long way since he first opened the Stoic Way and began exploring the principles of Stoicism. Each chapter of his journey, mastering perception, embracing voluntary discomfort, cultivating gratitude, accepting change, differentiating opinion from fact, practicing detachment, maintaining a moral compass, fostering self-discipline, and reflecting on mortality, had brought him closer to a life of wisdom, resilience, and inner peace. As he sat in his apartment one evening, Lucius reflected on the transformation he had undergone. He thought about the man he had been when he first started this journey, overwhelmed by stress, burdened by expectations, and constantly searching for happiness in external achievements. That man had been chasing peace in all the wrong places, believing that contentment could be found in status, possessions, and the approval of others. But now, Lucius understood that true peace came from within. It came from living in accordance with one's values, from embracing the present moment, and from accepting the impermanence of life. It came from the continuous pursuit of wisdom, the willingness to learn from every experience, and the commitment to grow in character and understanding. Lucius realized that the principles he had learned were not just abstract concepts but practical tools that he could use every day to navigate the challenges of life. He had applied these principles in his relationships, his work, and his personal development, and he had seen how they had brought him greater clarity, strength, and fulfillment. Yet, as much as Lucius had grown, he knew that his journey was far from over. The path of Stoicism was not a destination, but a lifelong practice, a continuous effort to live a virtuous and meaningful life, no matter what circumstances arose. There would always be new challenges, new opportunities for growth, and new lessons to learn. Lucius also knew that this journey was not just about his own personal growth. It was about how he could contribute to the world around him, how he could use the wisdom he had gained to help others find their own path to inner peace and resilience. He had already begun sharing his insights with friends, students, and colleagues, and he felt a deep sense of purpose in continuing to do so. As Lucius prepared to turn in for the night, he felt a sense of anticipation for the days to come. He knew that the future was uncertain and that there would be moments of joy, sorrow, success, and failure. But he also knew that he had the tools to face whatever came his way with grace and equanimity. Lucius walked over to his bookshelf where The Stoic Way sat among the many books he had read on his journey. He picked it up, feeling the weight of its pages, and smiled to himself. This book had been the catalyst for a profound transformation in his life, but it was not the end of his journey. It was simply a guide, a map that had helped him navigate the complexities of life and find his own way forward. He returned the book to its place on the shelf, knowing that the true value of what he had learned was not in the words themselves, but in how he lived them each day. The principles of Stoicism had become a part of who he was, shaping his thoughts, actions, and attitudes in ways that would continue to influence him for the rest of his life. Lucius stood by the window, looking out at the city below. The streets were quiet, the lights of the buildings twinkling in the distance. He felt a deep sense of peace as he thought about the journey that lay ahead. There would be new experiences, new challenges, and new opportunities for growth, and Lucius was ready to embrace them all. He knew that there would be times when he would falter, when old habits and fears would resurface, but he also knew that he had the resilience to overcome them. He had learned that the key to a meaningful life was not in avoiding difficulties, but in facing them with courage, wisdom, and integrity. As the night grew darker, Lucius felt a sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken. He was grateful for the lessons he had learned, the people who had supported him, and the experiences that had shaped him. But most of all, he was grateful for the realization that life was a continuous journey, a path that he would walk for as long as he lived, guided by the principles of Stoicism and the pursuit of wisdom. Lucius knew that the journey would not always be easy, but he also knew that it was the most important journey he could take. It was a journey toward becoming the best version of himself, toward living a life of virtue, purpose, and fulfillment. And it was a journey that he was committed to, knowing that each step brought him closer to the inner peace and resilience he sought. As he prepared for bed, Lucius took one last look out the window, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The world outside was full of uncertainties, but within himself, He had found a source of strength and peace that would guide him through whatever lay ahead. With a heart full of gratitude and a mind at peace, Lucius lay down to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities for growth. The journey continued, and Lucius was ready to embrace it with courage, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to living a life of virtue. And so, as the night settled over the city, Lucius closed his eyes, ready to face the future with confidence, peace, and the knowledge that he was on the right path, the path of continuous learning, growth, and the pursuit of a meaningful life. The journey was far from over, but Lucius knew that he was prepared to walk it, one step at a time, guided by the light of wisdom and the principles he had come to embody. The road ahead was long, but it was a road he was eager to travel, knowing that each step brought him closer to the life of inner peace and fulfillment that he sought. And so, Lucius slept peacefully, knowing that the journey continued and that he was ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The path of Stoicism was not a destination, but a way of life, and Lucius was committed to walking it every day for as long as he lived. Epilogue: The Stoic Path. Years passed, and Lucius's journey of self-discovery and Stoic practice became the foundation of his life. As he grew older, his understanding of Stoicism deepened, and the principles he had embraced became second nature to him. The challenges that once seemed insurmountable were now met with calm determination, and the successes that once fueled his ego were now seen as opportunities for gratitude and reflection. Lucius had learned that the essence of Stoicism was not in achieving perfection, but in the continuous effort to live in accordance with one's values. It was about recognizing the impermanence of all things and finding peace in the present moment, no matter what that moment held. This understanding had brought him a profound sense of inner peace, a peace that was not dependent on external circumstances, but rooted in his own sense of purpose and virtue. As Lucius approached the later stages of his life, he often found himself reflecting on the journey he had taken. He remembered the man he had been, driven by ambition, burdened by stress, and constantly searching for something more. That man had been lost in the pursuit of external success, believing that happiness lay in achieving goals and accumulating possessions. But through the teachings of Stoicism, Lucius had found a different path. A path that led not to external riches, but to inner wealth. He had learned that true happiness came from living a life of virtue, from embracing the present moment, and from cultivating a sense of gratitude for all that life had to offer. Lucius had also come to understand that the journey was not his alone. Throughout his life, he had shared the wisdom he had gained with others, helping them find their own path to peace and fulfillment. He had mentored young people, guided friends through difficult times, and offered support to those who were struggling. In doing so, he had created a legacy of wisdom and compassion that would continue long after he was gone. As Lucius sat on the porch of his modest home, overlooking a garden that had become his sanctuary, he felt a deep sense of contentment. The garden, with its carefully tended plants and vibrant flowers, was a reflection of the life he had cultivated, a life of simplicity, peace, and purpose. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the landscape. Lucius watched as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, and he felt a profound connection to the world around him. He knew that his time on this earth was finite, but he no longer feared death. Instead, he embraced it as a natural part of the cycle of life, a transition that would lead him to whatever lay beyond. Lucius closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening breeze on his face. He thought about the people who had been part of his journey, those who had taught him, those he had helped, and those who had walked alongside him. Each of them had contributed to the man he had become, and he was grateful for the role they had played in his life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lucius felt a sense of peace that went beyond words. He had lived a good life, a life guided by the principles of Stoicism and the pursuit of wisdom. He had faced challenges with courage, embraced change with grace, and lived each day with purpose and intention. And now, as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Lucius knew that his journey was coming to an end. But he also knew that the lessons he had learned, the wisdom he had gained, and the love he had shared would continue to live on in the hearts and minds of those he had touched. Which final locus to Gashen Lucius Smiligo himself felig a deep sense of fulfillment. He had walked the Stoic path, and it had led him to a life of meaning, peace, and joy. The journey had been long, but it had been worth every step. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a mind at peace, Lucius closed his eyes for the last time, ready to embrace whatever came next. The Stoic path had guided him through life, and now it would guide him into the great unknown. The night was quiet, and the stars shone brightly in the sky, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the small but meaningful part Lucius had played in it. His journey was complete, but the lessons he had learned would continue to illuminate the path for others, showing them the way to a life of virtue, wisdom, and inner peace. The Stoic path never truly ends. It is a way of being, a way of living that transcends time and space. And in the quiet of the night, Lucius's spirit remained, a beacon of wisdom and strength for all who sought to walk the path he had so faithfully followed. The journey continues for those who seek it, for those who are ready to embrace it, and for those who understand that the greatest riches are not found in the material world, but in the depth of one's soul and the clarity of one's mind. The Stoic path is open to all, and it is a path that leads, always, to the light of wisdom and the peace of the heart. Legacy: the Stoics' influence. Years after Lucius passed away, his presence was still felt in the community. His life had left an indelible mark on those who had known him, and the wisdom he had shared continued to resonate in the hearts and minds of many. His humble home, with its peaceful garden, became a symbol of the life he had lived, a life guided by Stoic principles, marked by quiet strength and filled with purpose. Lucius's friends and former students often gathered in that garden, sharing stories about the man who had touched their lives in so many ways. They spoke of his unwavering integrity, his calm demeanor in the face of adversity, and his ability to find meaning and joy in even the simplest aspects of life. They remembered how he had always listened with compassion, offering advice that was not just practical, but deeply rooted in the wisdom of the ages. One of Lucius's students, Livia, had been particularly influenced by his teachings. After her own difficult journey through personal struggles, she had found strength in the Stoic principles Lucius had introduced her to. Inspired by his example, Livia decided to dedicate her life to teaching these principles to others. She started a small school, where she offered classes on Stoic philosophy, mindfulness, and the art of living a virtuous life. The school quickly became a haven for those seeking guidance in navigating the challenges of modern life. Livia's classes were filled with people from all walks of life, young and old, rich and poor, each of them searching for the peace and resilience that Lucius had embodied. Livia taught them how to cultivate inner strength, how to practice gratitude and detachment, and how to live in harmony with their values. In each lesson, Livia felt Lucius's influence. She often found herself quoting his words, sharing stories of his life, and reflecting on the lessons he had taught her. She knew that the wisdom she was passing on was not her own, but a legacy that Lucius had entrusted to her. And she was determined to honor that legacy by helping others find their own path to inner peace and fulfillment. As the years went by, Livia's school grew in reputation, attracting students from far and wide. The teachings of Stoicism, once thought of as ancient and perhaps outdated, found new relevance in the modern world, offering practical solutions to the timeless challenges of human existence. The school became a place of learning, reflection, and community, a living testament to the impact one person could have when they committed to living a life of virtue and wisdom. In time, Livia wrote a book about her experiences and the lessons she had learned from Lucius. The book, titled The Stoic's Path, Lessons from a Modern Sage, became a bestseller, resonating with readers who were searching for meaning and direction in their lives. In the book, Livia shared not only the teachings of Stoicism, but also personal anecdotes about her time with Lucius, illustrating how his guidance had transformed her life and the lives of so many others. The book's success brought even more attention to Lucius's legacy. People from all over the world sought out Livia's school, eager to learn the principles that had guided Lucius through his life. The garden where Lucius had spent so many peaceful evenings became a place of pilgrimage, where visitors would come to meditate, reflect, and find inspiration. Lucius's influence extended beyond the confines of the school and the community. His teaching spread through social media, podcasts, and online forums, where people shared their own experiences with Stoicism and how it had helped them overcome their challenges. The principles of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance became a source of strength for countless individuals, guiding them through the complexities of modern life. In the years that followed, Lucius's name became synonymous with the resurgence of Stoic philosophy in the modern era. Scholars, philosophers, and everyday people alike cited his life as an example of how ancient wisdom could be applied to contemporary challenges. His story was told in classrooms, discussed in seminars, and featured in documentaries, each time inspiring a new generation to explore the Stoic path. But for those who had known him personally, Lucius was remembered not just for his teachings, but for the way he had lived his life. He was remembered as a man of quiet dignity, who had faced life's challenges with grace and courage, who had found joy in simplicity, and who had always remained true to his values. His legacy was not just in the words he had spoken or the lessons he had taught, but in the example he had set. A life well lived, a life of purpose and peace. As time passed, Lucius's influence continued to grow, touching the lives of people he had never met, in places he had never been. His legacy was a testament to the enduring power of Stoic philosophy, to the idea that wisdom, once discovered, has the potential to transform not just one life, but the lives of many. In the end, Lucius's life became a beacon of hope for those who sought a better way to live. His journey from a man burdened by stress and uncertainty to a sage of wisdom and peace inspired others to embark on their own journeys, to seek out the principles that would guide them through their lives. And so, Lucius's story lived on, not just in the memories of those who had known him, but in the hearts of all who were touched by the wisdom he had shared. The Stoic path that he had walked so faithfully became a path for others to follow, leading them toward the same peace, fulfillment, and inner strength that he had found. The journey continues, as it always will, for those who are ready to embrace it. And in the quiet moments of reflection, in the pursuit of wisdom, and in the commitment to living a life of virtue, Lucius's spirit remains, a guiding light for all who seek to walk the Stoic path. Final reflection: the enduring impact of a Stoic life. Lucius's story is more than just a personal journey. It's a testament to the timeless relevance of Stoic philosophy in guiding us through the complexities of life. His life illustrates how ancient wisdom can be a powerful tool for modern living, helping us navigate the challenges we face with resilience, clarity, and purpose. But Lucius's journey also serves as a reminder that the principles he lived by, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, are not just ideals to be admired, but practical tools to be applied in our daily lives. As we reflect on Lucius's life, we see that his true legacy lies not just in the impact he had on others, but in the way he transformed himself. He started as a man struggling with the pressures of the modern world, burdened by anxiety and the pursuit of external success. Through his commitment to Stoic principles, he evolved into someone who found peace within himself, who lived with purpose and integrity, and who left the world a better place through his actions. Lucius's journey is a powerful example of how we can all change our lives by changing our mindset. By embracing the principles of Stoicism, Lucius learned to focus on what he could control, to find joy in the present moment, and to approach life with a sense of gratitude and humility. These are lessons that we can all take to heart, regardless of where we are in our own journeys. In the end, Lucius's story is a reminder that the path to wisdom and inner peace is not about achieving perfection, but about making continuous progress. It's about striving to live in accordance with our values, even when the path is difficult. It's about recognizing that our time on this earth is limited and making the most of every moment. And it's about understanding that true happiness comes not from external achievements, but from within, from living a life of virtue and meaning. As we conclude Lucius's story, we are left with a sense of inspiration and hope. His journey shows us that no matter where we start, we have the power to change our lives for the better. We have the power to cultivate resilience, to find peace in the midst of chaos, and to live in a way that is true to ourselves. The principles that guided Lucius are available to all of us, and they can help us navigate the challenges of our own lives with the same grace and strength that Lucius demonstrated. His story is a call to action, encouraging us to embark on our own journeys of self-discovery, to seek out wisdom, and to live with intention and purpose. In the end, Lucius's legacy is not just about the impact he had on others, but about the enduring example he set for all of us. His life reminds us that the Stoic path is not just a philosophy to be studied, but a way of life to be lived, a path that leads to true happiness, fulfillment, and peace. As we move forward in our own lives, we can take comfort in the knowledge that the journey continues. The principles that guided Lucius are timeless, and they can guide us as well, helping us to find our own path to wisdom and inner peace. The road ahead may be long and uncertain, but with the lessons of Stoicism as our guide, we can walk it with confidence, knowing that we are on the right path, the path to a life well lived. And so, as we close the chapter on Lucius's story, we do so with a sense of gratitude and inspiration. His journey may have come to an end, but the lessons he learned and the wisdom he shared will continue to resonate, lighting the way for all who seek to walk the Stoic path.